Hello.
Okay, you can do it.
You got it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Take 3.
Oh man, this is gonna be rough.
If you're not careful, this is going to be the intro.
Go! Do not make this the intro.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fight For You podcast. I'm your host, Joe.
And I'm your other host, Crystal.
So, we have been gone for a lot longer than we originally intended to when we announced on our Facebook page that we were going to be taking a hiatus.
I believe we said we'd be gone in October. It's
You mean back?
No, back in November. We said we were taking off October.
Oh, that was confusing.
Sorry.
So anyway, yeah, I think when we said that we were going to be taking a hiatus, we said we'd be gone for a total of 3 weeks, and it turned into obviously way more.
Yeah.
And I think that we didn't really, we didn't want to put any, half-done stuff out there, which is kind of why we left it until now.
Yes.
We wanted to make sure that when we came back, we could really come back. We could really get back to regular episodes and do it right. So anyway, let's talk about the hiatus a little bit and why we took it and why it was so long. Essentially, there was a lot of stuff going on at the time, like in
fall retreat,
in our work. We had both of our fall retreats.
I had parent-teacher conferences.
And then I worked a lot on the youth group Christmas program.
We had Thanksgiving. We had Friendsgiving. My grandparents came. Your family came.
Mm-hmm. And
we
really,
had something every weekend in December.
Mm-hmm. And the season between Thanksgiving and Christmas is so short.
Yes, and it was pretty rough.
And yeah, it was a rough time for us. Which we'll get into some of that, I think, in future episodes and stuff like that. But it was I think ultimately it was a time of more learning for both of us, and good stuff, really good stuff has come out of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't easy at the time.
No.
Which I think is a good reminder, that while we are very passionate about this, we're very passionate about helping people with relationships. We're very passionate about problem solving in relationships. We don't present ourselves as experts.
If you see something moving in the background, that's our dog.
That's our white German Shepherd.
Sorry, it just looks like this thing.
So it's like a Loch Ness monster, a big white furry Loch Ness monster named Griffin.
Just wanted to let you know we're okay if you're watching the video. It's just Griffin.
He will probably come around and check us out from time to time. So, but anyway, what was I saying?
You were talking about why we want to help people.
Right, yeah, and that we're, we don't hold ourselves up as experts or having arrived. We're definitely on this journey with you guys, but at the same time, when things like that happen, it's a proof to me that how we approach this stuff, it works. And if you are committed to fighting for your marriage and problem solving and using conflict to your advantage in marriage, it will really work, and it will really keep you together, keep you on the same team, and strengthen your relationship. So that said, it was kind of a rough one for us. It was just busy. It was stressful. Not that there wasn't a lot of good stuff in there too, but that's life sometimes. Lots of
learning, lots of changing, lots of getting to know ourselves a little better, which we'll talk about in a different episode. I think we should probably move on because otherwise we're going to start talking about that instead of the reason we're here.
Well, so anyway, but the hiatus is officially over. The Fight For You podcast is officially back. We're going to be cranking out regular weekly episodes again.
Yes.
Very excited to do that. Very excited to interact with you guys more as we do that, answering questions and having a conversation with you, not just us talking to you. We're very excited about this.
If you have something to talk about, we want to hear it.
And, really, we kind of debated about where we were going to go with this first episode back. And we ultimately kind of decided to just jump right back into it and do the big one.
Yeah, this is the one that I don't want to do, but I want to do. Like,
I definitely don't feel prepared to do it.
no, but I don't think, like you said earlier, off of mic, I don't think we'd ever feel prepared to do it. So,
and you know, I think that the one thing I will say is that rather than this being a standalone episode, what this might wind up being is actually the beginning of a series within our podcast.
yeah.
Where we talk about this particular subject because it's one that we are still working with. It's one that
It changes.
It's not a one-off. It's not something that we just dealt with and it went away. And it's probably going to be part of our story for a long time.
Probably almost always. I don't know that I'll
well,
ever.
at least to a degree of talking about it and sharing our experiences with it. And so, in case you're being driven nuts, wondering exactly what this topic is, the subject of today's episode is anxiety.
Yeah.
So the title of this episode is when your spouse has anxiety. Because
I'm the spouse that has anxiety for those that don't know.
Because what we want to do, I think, is we kind of want to take a two-pronged approach to this. So you're going to share and you're going to talk about your experiences with anxiety and we're going to talk about it. But then I'm also going to share from my point of view as the spouse of someone who has crippling anxiety, not someone who has anxiety myself, not like generalized anxiety, nothing beyond the normal, I think, experience of like, I guess, your average person who doesn't deal with anxiety and what that's like, being in a relationship, how it affects the marriage and sort of how we started to walk through that, I think, very clumsily at first.
Yeah.
And are getting better at it. So, yeah, anxiety, that's the one we're doing today. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into you kind of sharing what you want to share as far as your experience and kind of what your journey has been to this point.
Okay. Well, I have general anxiety disorder, which means I think the ultimate worst is going to happen about everyday things. And this didn't just happen. I think a lot of people have anxiety without understanding that they have anxiety.
I would agree.
For me, I've had it since I was, probably high school to junior high. But I just knew how to, I was able to cover it up and I was able to cope with it because I still had, I still had enough energy, I feel like. I feel like it's almost that you get older and you lack the energy because you are giving so much more than when you're younger. When you're younger, I did drill team and I did choir, but those things were for me. I wasn't really giving all the time like I do as a teacher and as a pastor's wife. I'm a youth pastor's wife. So I feel like when you're giving constantly, you get depleted way more. And so I think that's one reason why it came out way more later on in my life. In high school, I passed out in a football game one time because of anxiety. In college, if someone was mad at me, it would give me anxiety. So first it started kind of with relationships. And then when I got married, it would happen with things like I'd hear a sound in the house and I would think the house is going to fall in, or I'd hear a sound in the car, I'd think the car was going to fall apart. If Joe doesn't text me back, he must be mad at me. Just things like that. And I kind of had a toxic friendship that definitely amped up my anxiety. And also, I am an only child, and it took a long time for me to understand that a lot of my anxiety stems from that. And it's no one's fault. It just does because as the only child, you want to be everything that your parents, grandparents, family members, you want to be everything that they want you to be. And they want the best for you because they love you and they're your family, but that can put a lot of pressure because you're the only one. There's no other sibling to kind of take any of that. So I grew really afraid of disappointing people, and that became another reason I had anxiety. A few years ago, we had a really bad storm. To everybody around here, I'm sure it wasn't really bad, but to me, I never experienced hail coming down like it did. And I was watching a show that had gunfire in it, Prison Break, and that's going on, and then all of a sudden, like, I hear it coming down terribly on top of the roof, and I didn't know what was going on, and it just made my heart go like crazy fast. And then looking at the devastation the next day made me very fearful. We didn't even have much, like, at all, but there was a lot around town, and that was just really hard for me to see, and that kind of planted just another seed. So I feel like throughout my life there's been like a seed here and a seed there, and after a while those seeds start to pile up. And I started to just see it as part of me. Like, well, this is me. I have anxiety. Like, lots of people have anxiety. Lots of my teacher friends have anxiety. I had a really bad class one year, and that gave me extreme anxiety.
But I think I would interject, like, at that point, you didn't know it was anxiety.
I didn't, no.
And so you weren't necessarily saying, this is me, I have anxiety. You were just saying, this is me, period.
Yeah.
This is how I am.
This is just how I am. You're right. Because I didn't notice it was anxiety. I don't even know necessarily when it kind of woke up and I was like, oh, I have anxiety.
I do.
When was that?
It was the day that we were in Runza in Scotts Bluff.
Runza and Scotts. Oh.
But
Generalized Anxiety Disorder.
And that's when
that.
we really started to, that was when, not to skip ahead into my part of the story too much, but that was when I was like, sweetheart, I think there is a name for what you have. I think you have this. Yeah. And it wasn't like you have this is awful. It was this thing that you've been struggling with and grappling with that's just like this nameless, giant, overwhelming thing. Yeah. It actually isn't that. It is a real condition, and millions of people have it, and you're going to be okay. Like, like, you're not, I think I remember, because one of your lines that you would go to in your frustration when this would cause problems between us was, I feel like I'm just a crazy person. I feel like I'm insane.
Yeah.
And I believe that is what I said to you that day. I was like, you are not crazy. Of course, I've been telling you that this whole time.
But I feel crazy when you're in it.
Right. And I said, look, you're not crazy. You are a totally normal person who has a psychological condition that millions of other Americans have, and is totally treatable, and there are tons of ways to go about dealing with it, and not just dealing with it and coping with it, because I feel like that's a big theme of our journey, but actually getting better.
Yeah.
Like, you can have your life back. You're not always going to be, this isn't always going to be on top of you, just weighing you down. Like, you can have victory over this. So that was the first day, that Runza in Scotts Bluff.
But I feel like we were on the journey to that, because
we were close, but
that was in the fall, past fall.
Yeah.
But last summer, we talked about the fog that I would get into and how I'd
But as far as when we started having the conversation,
pinpointing the exact thing that I have, yes,
what it was, and the fact that this is anxiety.
Yes.
It was last fall. It was in Runza in Scotts Bluff.
And I remember, because later that day I went to Dr. Boggs' office and I was like, please help me. And I'm crying, and I'm like, I want to do this the most natural way I can, if that's possible. I'm not against medication for anybody that takes it. I'm not. I want to try everything I can before that's where I would go to. And so he just helped me with that. But anyways, rewind a little bit. It just got to where I would feel this fog and I wouldn't know what was going on. I'd get really frustrated. Joe would tell me, this is not a big deal. But to me, that's all I could think about. Like, it would fill my head, and all I could focus on was whatever was right here in my mind in front of me, and everything else was just foggy and I couldn't see it. And then all of a sudden that all would lift and I could see again, and that's how it would happen for a while. It'd be over things like the dog. It was always everyday things that I felt like if I didn't control it, it would get messed up. And so that's my OCD, and my controlling was ramped up. And what was frustrating for me which I think a lot of Christian women feel, is that I was constantly told, well, give it to God, give it to God. And honest to goodness, I was trying.
And you know, beyond just the initial sentiment of praying about it, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
You know, how
do you help someone by saying that, unless you're going to show them what that means?
That's not really an actionable term if you're just saying it and leaving it at that. You know, like someone struggling with anxiety per se, give it to God. I have done my good deed for the day. I've helped someone with their anxiety. No, you haven't. Just by saying give it to God, because that doesn't, and that's something else we're going to talk about actually, but that's just telling someone to do something without showing them how.
Right. Well, and I'm not talking about the people that gave me verses. That's totally different. That's them trying to help me.
That is showing you how.
Yes. That's not what I'm talking about. But there's some people that just go to the give it to God, and it's like...
And it's one of those...
What does that mean?
It's just one of those like buzz phrases that gets thrown around. And
or just pray about it.
When nothing happens beyond that, it doesn't really help.
No. Well, and I was just getting frustrated, and that is part of the anxiety circle, is that you feel like you're not getting better, or you have a bad day, so then you're back at the bottom because you're beating yourself up again. And the thing is, like, it all is interconnected. And I know that Satan knows what's going to set me off. He knows that I am OCD about certain things because of my anxiety. And so I have to recognize that. And I do read my Bible before anything else right now, especially because I need that to be the first thing that goes into my head. Last night I was having a little bit of anxiety. Because of what I ate that day. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, so you eat a lot of sugar, and that affected me, which I'll talk about later. But last night, I just put on my Bible app on the Bible, and I just let it start reading, and I was asleep before you knew it. And so just those things are good, and it's so crucial. Don't get me wrong. The Bible is amazing in how it can calm you down, but that, just to say... give it to God. I feel like as Christians, we say that way too often without actually understanding to that person. That might make them beat themselves up, because I was beating myself up thinking I'm obviously not giving it to God, when really and truly, I believe I was trying. I just didn't know the tools because I didn't know what I had, and you have to understand what it is to deal with it, and I didn't know.
So your anxiety kind of, you feel like, you know, was always there, you know, back to like junior high and high school, and it kind of began to manifest itself in different ways and grow and sort of take more control over your minds as you got older, moved through college and into marriage. Well,
and even like, I remember in my dating relationships, those poor guys, I mean, I just was, if they tried to break up with me, which needed to happen because I'm here now, I am obviously not dating them or with them, but I would like have a panic attack because I just couldn't handle that rejection. It was all tied in together. And that was anxiety. I didn't understand it. I wasn't trying to be an emotional girl, but that was anxiety.
And I think that, you know, probably there are girls out there who unfortunately get labeled as emotional or needy or clingy or crazy, because
which I probably was one of those.
They have anxiety and just don't know it. Because I would say, you know, as your husband who's walked with you through this and learned a lot about it, that probably, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that the two feelings that anxiety basically amplifies in your mind the most, and had been doing ever since back then, were fear and control. You know, an overwhelming sense of fear and an overwhelming need to control.
Yes. I need to control it so that I'm not afraid. Even though that totally doesn't work. It makes you more it's a bad circle.
Well, it creates like this negative loop of, you know,
when you become so obsessed with controlling things and you can't control anything. And so then you feel like a failure all the time because you can't control. You're not God. You can't control anything.
I think the more you try to control, the more you're afraid you won't be able to control it, and the more you feel like you need to control.
Yes. Even to Joe, like, I didn't even realize it, but I know that I was trying to control him, but I wasn't trying to control him because I wanted to be controlling. I was trying to control him because my emotions couldn't handle something happening to him, or if something did happen, my anxiety would go crazy because it's like, see, if he had done this, that wouldn't have happened, which is not reality, but that's what we like to tell ourselves. Because I remember sitting down with Joe and saying, in my perfect world, you, me, and the dogs are all in the basement with blankets and nobody's coming in, we are down there forever and we're safe. Like, I mean, that's not living. That's,
Which,
but to me, that was like a dream.
And to me, that's a waking nightmare.
But I was like, that's what I would love more than anything. So, yeah.
Right. And I think it's important to note that that's not really what you would love more than anything. That's what would make you feel the most safe.
Yes.
In a sense.
Because I can control that. Because we're all downstairs.
Controlled environment.
Yeah.
No, no unknown factors.
Yeah.
Anything like that. So yeah, and that was sort of, I feel like we've sort of talked about your journey up until, we got married and some stuff about our marriage. You talked about the storm and things like that. How else did you notice your anxiety developing after our marriage, like in our marriage through the years?
I mean, I noticed it with teaching, which there's a lot of teachers that deal with anxiety. So many kids right now have trauma. And so it's a lot. You have a lot of really needy, not in a needy, like, bad way, but, like, needy, and they need love and they need care. And if you yourself aren't okay, you can't give that to them. And then feeling just expectations from everywhere. I just put so much pressure on myself to be everything to everyone instead of thinking, okay, who does God want me to be? Instead of who does so-and-so want me to be? God wants me to be the best I can be, but that's not going to be great every day. I'm going to have moments, and that's okay, because for me, to have a moment of panic just meant that I was not getting better at all, and so I shouldn't try. And so it became this battle of, I think I'm getting better. No, I'm not. I think I'm getting better. No, I'm not. And then I would beat myself up and I'd call myself a crazy person.
And beyond also feeling it wasn't worth trying, you, I think, would also tend to feel like because of what was happening in the moment, everything you had done up until that moment was rendered worthless.
Worthless, yeah. Yeah. Well, and it just made me feel like a crummy wife, I wanted to do what was best for my husband, and I do want to be a mom one day, and I'm like, I don't want our kids to have to deal with this. I want them to have a happy or joyful and peaceful and happy mom, not a frightened of everything. I mean, when I think of how bad my anxiety was in my head that I didn't tell anybody, it's, if you know Lemony Snicket's and you know Aunt Josephine, who tells you not to touch the doorknob because it could splatter into a million pieces, and don't step on the rug because it'll trip you, and we don't have the heat on in here because that could start a fire. I mean, literally in my mind, that's where I would almost go. I wasn't that bad, but I was close. And it's good to be honest about it, because one of the problems was I didn't think of it as bad as it was. And so I don't feel like I could really get better, because I just would make excuses for it sometimes. And then sometimes I beat myself up about it. But it was like I couldn't figure out how to move forward from it. And I would look at people that I look up to that are happy and joyful, and I'd be like, I want to be like that. And it would almost be discouraging, because I'd feel like I'm never going to be like that, and I'm always going to be this way. And I'm not. I know that I'm better today than I was a month ago. A month ago was very terrible. But you just kind of reach a point where I finally, I talked to Dr. Boggs, my chiropractor, and he just told me, can you work out? Like, can you get the energy to move? And I said yes. And he goes, then you've got to do it. And I honestly didn't when he told me that. I did not listen to my doctor. But then about, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks ago, when I really was just, it was the end of January, I think. And I was just like, I'm fed up with this. I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of acting like this. I know that I am more than this. I can do better than this. I changed everything. I just said, this is not working. I was eating terribly because when you feel terrible, the last thing you want to do is cook healthy food. You want to just go get KFC. And carbs are my life. Not anymore, but like, I love them. I love bread. Bread is life. But I was not working out. And I felt terrible. And I was like, there's got to be something else. And I remember Dr. Boggs telling me, you've got to work out every day. And since I've been doing that lately, it has changed my life. And I watch how much sugar and caffeine and all that I put in my body, not because I'm trying to lose weight, but just because I want to feel mentally clear. And it has helped so much, even to where I do have times that I know that my mind's going, but I'm able to fight it more because I have tools in my belt. But I wouldn't have had those if Joe hadn't looked into typing in, what is this? Like, I'm sure he just looked it up on the internet and was like, these are all the things. What is this? And it came back general anxiety disorder. And I think there's something powerful about saying, this is a thing, and I have this thing. How do I get better from this? So.
And that's a good segue because we're going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But for now, what I want to do is flip over now to my sharing my side of the story and my experiences through this. The reason that I wanted to do this, the reason the episode is titled What to Do When Your Spouse Has Anxiety, is because, we know that there is your side where you are the one who has this very difficult condition that you're dealing with. But often I think what we don't hear is the other side, with things like this. When you're married, it's not just you that is dealing with this. It's not just you that's affected by this.
Right.
And so we wanted to do this. We wanted to talk about this, and I wanted to share my experiences in the hopes that, if there's a husband or wife out there who is the other partner, who your spouse, your partner is struggling with this severe anxiety, and maybe you're wondering what to do, or you're feeling discouraged, or you're feeling helpless, you're questioning things, maybe this can be of help to you. So back when we first started dating and were engaged, I'm going to say, because what I'm getting to with this is it took me a long time to catch on to the fact that you had anxiety. I think at first I just sort of took it as part of your personality because you were a very forceful personality in general. And I think even without the anxiety, that's who you are. You're stubborn.
Just in a different way.
Right. You're stubborn. You're independent.
Which he liked about me, by the way.
And I do. But I think that...
not liked.
But I think that what happened was slowly that as your anxiety worsened and manifested itself more, those two things kind of blended together to where they kind of became... indistinguishable from each other.
You know what I think of when you do that?
What?
Spider-Man. When he puts on that black, what's it called?
The symbiote?
No, it's the Venom.
Yeah,
when Venom
that's
takes,
the symbiote.
Oh, I don't know. Obviously, I am not big. Anyways, sorry.
So...
Sidetrack.
Anyway, this usually happens late at night.
Yeah. Well, it is Thursday after Valentine's Day, so
you'll have to forgive teacher brain a little bit. But I think that's what happened. You were a forceful, independent personality, which is one of the things that attracted me to you in the first place. But as your struggle with anxiety, I think, moved a little more from inward to outward and got worse because anxiety does that. Like that's for one. Anxiety starts off small and it will wind up.
I feel like it's almost back brain at first.
Yeah.
And then it moves to your whole brain.
It's like as we've talked about this and as I have thought about this, it almost is like a noise. At first it's just like this almost indistinguishable noise, and it just rises and rises and rises. So anxiety starts off small, and it will run the whole show if it just keeps growing unchecked. So in the beginning, I just thought that it was number one, your personality, and number two, sort of the extenuating circumstances surrounding our dating and
Dating,
engagement.
yeah.
We were long distance the whole time. That provided plenty of stress on its own. I think it
Maybe
would have
God
been.
did that on purpose, because otherwise she would have gone running for the hills.
Yeah.
I
So,
say that because I know myself. So.
I had already been through a lot by the time that we
Yeah.
got married, just to preserve the relationship. And I mean, that's just a fact. It's not, bashing on you or anything. It was just that it was incredibly stressful, and
It was for me too.
and I don't think that the stress of our engagement and getting married, I'm going to say I don't think that was necessarily anxiety inducing for you.
No.
That was just plain old stress.
Yeah.
It was
I was
stress
planning a wedding
and
and
difficulty, and we were separate, and we, I mean.
And I was worried about leaving my family, which we've already talked about all this in previous podcasts.
Right.
But.
So, but I think it was after that, when you had moved up to Nebraska and we were getting started, I think that's when your anxiety really started to show itself a little more. And it put me, I think almost right away, it put me in a strange place, because I think the first, your anxiety would manifest itself often, I think, not when it was just the two of us, but in settings where there were other people, whether it was my family, whether it was church family, whether it was friends. Not so much your family.
Really?
Because a lot of your anxiety was related to not being around your family.
That's true.
And so...
Well, at the beginning, I feel like it's...
Yeah, I'm talking about...
Okay, at the beginning. Yeah,
I'm kind of going chronological here. And so I think that your anxiety would come out a lot, like when we'd be around my family.
Yeah.
Or when we would just be in situations that you were new and unfamiliar, which at the time was every situation.
Yeah.
And it would sort of make me, even at the time, I wanted to be understanding and considerate of you, but also there was this disconnect in my brain of like, this doesn't seem totally like this doesn't seem like the Crystal that I got to know at Frontier Camp, who, did fine around people, and this kind of stuff it didn't happen, and that was before we were together, and she was, codependent on me. And so I was kind of wondering, why is she having such a hard time around my family? Why is she having such a hard time just socializing with other people?
That was so hard. Like, it took everything in me to have conversations with people at the beginning.
Yeah, and that was kind of tough for me to, I think, wrap my head around. Number one, because it wasn't the experience that I had with you to that point. And two, even though I'm a very introverted person, for me what that means is that I get recharged by being alone, by having alone time. I don't get my batteries charged by being in a group of people.
Yeah.
And so for me, I like people a lot, and I like to socialize, and I like to be around people. I mean, it's part of my job. And so that kind of, I guess, took me back a little bit, and kind of made me wonder, is she going to be okay with this life? Is she...
I remember you were willing to stop ministry for me, and I didn't want you to, because I knew that wasn't what we needed to do. But
and I don't think that was even like necessarily a serious course of action I was thinking about taking, but it was something that in conversation I put on the table, like, what would I need to do? Like, is there something I could just do to make this better? Because, I didn't know what I was seeing, and I wanted to help. And so, in the beginning, I didn't really know what to think, but I could see that there was a difference in how you would be, by yourself as opposed to around my family or in social situations. And then there were other things that, I just thought, again, were sort of due to your personality and things like that looking back, I realized they weren't, but, like how upset you get if I went to the grocery store without you, or something like that. Like if you didn't know everything that we were going to
control. Yeah.
shop for ahead of time,
Yeah.
things like that. At the time, and this is the first thing that I think might really be helpful to people. At the time, it was really discouraging for me because what I was getting from that, when you would get really upset at me, and when your anxiety would manifest itself over like grocery shopping and stuff, that's not what I was getting at all. That's not what was coming across to me at all. What I was feeling was, does she really not trust me to this level?
I remember you saying, you don't trust me. And, and
like, how low is your opinion of me that I can't shop for groceries?
Yeah. Which had nothing to do with you, but I didn't even know that at the time.
Right. And so, that's the first thing. Like, if you're having a similar kind of experience, I think that maybe the first thing that you need to understand is that it might not be you at all.
Right. Because it wasn't him. That was my anxiety and needing to control.
And I think beyond noticing things like that and just kind of being discouraged by things like that, the next time that I really noticed something significant was the hailstorm.
Yeah. It was really bad.
And that was where something I think switched over in my mind to say, this is not just her personality, there's something else going on here. Because we had a hailstorm. It was a reasonably bad hailstorm. I grew up in this part of the country my whole life. I've seen worse hailstorms than this. And we, like Crystal said, didn't really have much damage to our stuff. I think like the
roof needed to be replaced. But
the roof had to be redone, and the
awnings,
window covers on my Explorer got broken, not even the windows. And that storm just radically affected you so much. And as I think back on it, I almost think that it was like your anxiety getting permission to come out into the light.
Well, but without me calling it anxiety.
Right, but that was what happened. It was like, boom, this is me now.
It was Venom. I'm like Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man.
No, you're like Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock is Venom.
Oh, I don't want to be Eddie Brock. I want to be Spider-Man.
I think that's the point.
Okay, fine. You're right. He is the one that. Dang it! Thought I was cool, but I'm not.
So that was when the Venom really showed itself. That was when your anxiety, I think, kind of came out into center stage.
Yeah.
And I still didn't know what it was, obviously, but I knew that something is going on. And I think that was when things really started to get disheartening, and it really started to get tough for me because and here's I think where a lot of people are, whether they know it or not, if their spouse is struggling with anxiety. I could literally like see something physically happen to you when you would get a panic attack, which I didn't know.
I didn't know really what that was.
A panic attack at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like I could see a physical change.
And you would tell me that, like,
yeah.
I see when you're doing it.
Like, I would be looking at her, and I would be talking to her, and then it was just like something would just go from her eyes, and it was like I was not talking to my wife anymore.
Well, I wasn't listening to anything you were saying. I was just thinking about whatever I felt like I needed to do to control the situation that I felt I was in. And
it would feel weird, and it would feel, it was just so strange. Like I would be saying things to you and in some cases repeating myself over and over again with a very clear sense that I am not getting through. And so I knew that something was going on, and it really, And here's the thing, like in none of this conversation do we want to downplay what it's like to have anxiety, or to say that, well, if a couple has anxiety, it's actually worse for the person who doesn't actually have the anxiety.
No,
we're not doing that.
No,
but at the same time, it's
we
a very
feel like it's
real...
not talked about that the spouse that doesn't have anxiety is still going through a lot, because honestly, when I'm struggling with anxiety bad, I can't do anything to help Joe because I can't do anything to help me. And so
and
it's important.
And especially before I knew what was going on. It was lonely. It was honestly kind of like embarrassing. You know, like if we were out, you don't need to apologize for that. But if like we would be out with friends or family or something, or with family, and you had a panic attack, I would kind of be left standing there.
Yeah.
And
because for me, it's about saving my mind. It's not, I don't care about anybody else in the room. It's all about, I have to control what's ever going on up here.
Yeah. And so you might, get angry. You might, you might have an outburst at me and then leave. And then I would just kind of be sitting there with whoever else was there, really with no explanation for what was going on.
Yeah.
And wondering like our families or our friends must think that we're in all this trouble, that like our marriage is horrible, stuff
Which it
like
really
that.
wasn't. It was just this.
Right. And so it was lonely. It was embarrassing. It was, there was shame involved in it. Like, what's going on?
I would get
Why?
embarrassed too.
Right. And I'm not saying that, but this is from the other side of the story. And I would feel very helpless. Like my wife is dealing with something and I don't know how to help her. I don't know what's going on. I don't know, is this just going to keep getting worse? And this is the thing where like I think the fight for you element of it comes in, because this isn't an anxiety podcast. This is a marriage podcast.
Yeah.
Because there are two sort of separate but equal realities here.
Well, and we'll say that this can go for any sickness that your spouse or you have.
But there's two kind of separate but equal realities here.
Yeah.
The first is I didn't sign up for this.
Right.
When we got married, I did not know that this was a struggle for you. Of course, in some ways you didn't know.
I didn't know.
At least what it was.
No.
But I had no clue.
Yeah.
And if I were going just based on the you that I knew when we met at Frontier Camp, the person I wound up marrying was a whole different reality. And that I think is where some people can wind up. And if you don't go about this in the right way, that can be a devastating thing on both sides.
Well, I remember telling you, like, I'm so sorry you didn't sign up for this.
Right. And so that's the first reality. Like I said, like separate but equal realities. The first reality is I didn't sign up for this, but the second reality is I signed up for this exactly.
Yeah.
Because guys, marriage vows cover this.
In sickness and in health, and mental sickness is still sickness.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a way, I did sign up for this. Now, what I did not sign up for, and I think it's important to make this distinction, especially for like anxiety, depression, stuff like that, what I did not sign up for was to suffer my whole life.
Right.
What I signed up for was to be there for you, to not fail you, and to help you, to stay by your side, and ultimately to help you become the person that you are supposed to be. And the person that you are supposed to be is not someone who is forever firmly in the grip of crippling anxiety. That I think it is the important part. So I think that's ultimately the point, is I think where we really sort of came out of the darkness and into the light, so to speak, and where we really started to make progress was that day in Runza that we talked about before, where like the night before, and I don't even remember what it was, but you had a really bad anxiety attack.
That day I was having a bad anxiety attack. Like I remember shaking and like I just hated everything, and
it was in a season like a month or so where your anxiety caused us to have some of the worst fights that we'd
over dumb things
ever had.
Yeah. I don't even remember the fights. That's how you know it's a dumb fight. Yeah. And that's how you know it's a false mood. I can talk about that stuff later.
So maybe in your own podcast that is actually anxiety focused.
Well, hey, I did talk about it today. The Mood Cure, by the way.
So,
good book.
But anyway, and I remember because, and this is where we get vulnerable, people, but you had said some truly horrible things to me.
And the sad thing is, I don't even remember what I said to you.
Well, you insinuated that I was not going to be a good father. Not insinuated, you pretty much directly said that.
That was in December, yeah.
Yeah, and stuff like that, like, just, and
Well, I called you workaholic, yeah, there was a lot.
I mean, it was, and it wasn't stuff that was... It wasn't representative of reality.
No.
it wasn't how
When it was a time, I mean, December was crazy busy. He was crazy busy, but that's not a norm. And if I was in a normal state of mind,
Right.
I would know that.
And what I was trying to get past your anxiety and get you to understand was this is a season.
And to me, I was just like, this is not what I signed up for. That's what actually I said.
Right.
This is not what I signed up for.
So just horrible stuff. And I remember, after the fog had lifted.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was talking to
And I always
my wife
felt so
again.
bad after the fog lifted. Because
Yeah.
then I would be like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Which again, on the flip side, can kind of be discouraging and almost kind of hurtful to the spouses. You would have these horrible panic attacks where you would lash out at me, you would you would say these really hurtful things to me, and then immediately the fog would lift and you would feel really bad and you would need me to like cuddle and comfort you.
Yeah, because I would feel terrible.
And I'm thinking like, you just hurt me and now you need me to make you feel better.
Yeah.
How does this make sense? How is this fair to me? And I kind of...
and that was before we called it what it was precisely too.
Right.
Like we still were, we're learning. This is still a learning experience, and we were definitely learning back then.
And so I just we had a conversation when the fog lifted, and I remember saying I basically said these two things. The one we already mentioned, where I said, this isn't fair to me. I love you so much. I want to help you. I want to support you, but this is unfair to me. I can't be treated like this anymore because and that's the second thing I said, because I can't do this anymore. I have no strength left. I have been giving and giving and giving to try to help you, and I can't. I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm beyond running on fumes. And it was in the wake of that night, you were tired and worn out, and so you fell asleep not too long after that.
Well, because I remember saying, I just wish you knew how it felt, because it's frustrating.
Right.
Like, I'm sitting here and I'm just like, I wish you understood this, you want them to understand, because I was just beginning to understand, and so I'm trying to get you to understand, even though it's not your fault that you don't understand.
Right. And so you went to sleep. And I was kind of staying up, and you had said that to me, and that was kind of ringing around in my head. And it occurred to me, I have never really done research into why some of this stuff might be happening. Like, is there a reason beyond just like we've got some dysfunction or something like that? Or she's just got some personality faults that are really bad. And that's when I started doing research, and it was like within 10 minutes, I had pulled up multiple pages on generalized anxiety disorder, and I was going down the list of symptoms, and I was like, check, 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 check. And it almost, in a weird way, it was almost exciting.
Yeah.
Like the next day I called you and I was like, hey, we need to meet for lunch. Like, we need to talk. And you were still kind of down and discouraged. And even
I felt
then,
terrible about the night before.
Right. And even then you weren't sure when we sat down, and I told you, I said, look, this has a name. It's a real thing. Like, that's when I sat down with you, and that's when I said, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
This is a normal thing. And like, I don't know, maybe, and maybe you can speak to this better than I can, but honestly, I think that you took your first steps to freedom through normalizing what you were dealing with.
Yes, at first it was really scary, because honestly, to a person with anxiety, when someone says, this is you, you just think, you want to put me on medication. Like, you want me to be okay for you. And that's not at all what Joe was doing, but your anxiety tells you, like, because your anxiety is trying to protect you. That's the whole point of it. And so that's...
And I feel like this is a good place to say that, anxiety tries to convince you that living with it and coping with it is dealing with it.
Yeah.
And it's not.
So I told him, because he was like, we need to get you to see a doctor or somebody. He's like, I don't care who it is. You just need help. And I already had an appointment with Dr. Boggs that day. And so that's why I was like, I would feel better. I trust this man. He has saved my headaches, and like they're gone. I want to ask him what I can do to help this. And that was like the first big step. That's not my most current, it wasn't a change of my whole life, but it definitely was a big step.
But to what I was saying,
Yeah.
your first steps towards freedom were from normalizing what you had, from
well,
not
it was knowing
thinking,
I wasn't alone.
and that's what I'm saying, from
Yeah.
not thinking that you were insane and that
Yeah.
you belonged in an asylum and that you were a crazy person
Yeah,
and
'cause I
no
did
one in
think
the
I did.
world understood what was going on in your head and there was no help or anything like that, to I'm a normal person who has a condition that a lot of people have and I'm not crazy and I don't belong in an insane asylum.
Well, and he told me this is what it is, and he just told me all these things. And I was like, I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like that's how I feel. And for him, who doesn't understand anxiety, for him to say things that are exactly what go through my mind, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, okay, this must be real because
it was a revelation.
Yeah.
And while I didn't understand anxiety at the time, I am a quick study. Like I'm a legendary quick study. I can become an expert on virtually anything very fast because I love to read, I love to learn, I love to research. And so all of a sudden I'm reading all these articles and finding all these things about GAD and even going beyond you in the podcast that you had found.
Yeah.
Like, have you listened to this episode yet? No? Oh, you really should. It's a good one.
This podcast that I found, and it's just very good. It's not a Christian podcast, so I'm not going to like rep it or anything, but this person has general anxiety disorder, and it just helped me tremendously to hear from that person, you are more than anxiety. And he talks through, like he would just talk and I would be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel. Like that's me. And it makes you feel so good because it's like, okay, I can get through this. I can get better. He talks about how when you have practiced anxiety for so many years, you're not going to beat it in a few days. And so if you make a mistake or you fall back a little bit, that's okay. You can keep pushing because it's going to take a while and you're going to have setbacks, but it's not, you always tell me when I feel like I failed, because I'm like, I'm a failure. And you always tell me,
you're not a failure.
but you don't just say that.
I mean,
You don't say, I'm not a failure. You just say, it's just a setback. That's what you tell me. It's just a setback. And
it doesn't negate all the progress you've made to this point.
Exactly.
It's just a setback.
Because anxiety tells you, oh, you haven't gotten anywhere.
Yeah.
And anxiety, and for me, because I'm a Christian, I believe in spiritual warfare. I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think it's used against me. I think he uses my anxiety against me. So don't think I'm just calling anxiety anxiety, but that's going off topic, sorry.
And by the way, if you hadn't learned at this point, my wife is very passionate about this topic.
Yes.
Very passionate about helping other people with it, about calling attention to it, about normalizing it. She doesn't have a podcast of her own or anything at this point to deal with anxiety.
But you can follow me on Facebook.
But you can follow her on Facebook. She often does live videos about it and stuff.
I did one today.
And make some noise if you want her to start her own podcast or vlog relating to this topic.
I thought about doing YouTube, but I don't know. I want to know if you want it.
Yeah, so give her feedback. If you want it, tell her, and we'll make it happen. I will help her. I think she has a ton of insight to offer people on this. But anyway, I want to wrap things up today by talking about how, we've kind of shared our story and our experience up to this point, but I want to talk about basically like how life has changed since we figured out what exactly it was, and sort of how it's different now for both of us. And I think we've talked a lot about how it's different for you already, and just changes of how you think about it and strategy.
I feel like I'm clearer. I have moments of fog, but I feel like I'm able to fight it better.
I feel like I went in the relationship, I went from just sort of bystander who didn't understand what was going on and was just sort of a spectator to what was going on, to ally.
Yeah,
now,
I definitely feel like you're my teammate.
To now I understand what's going on in your mind, and so not only do I know how to research, how to help, and how to do it in a way that's more effective, but I also do less of the things and employ less of the tactics and approaches that were not helpful.
Yes.
Simply because I just didn't really know what to do.
Right.
And I feel like
the biggest one was the pressure.
Yeah.
Even though it worked sometimes. So that's why he thought, oh, well, this was working. But then towards the end, towards the end of the bad spell, I would be thinking and focused on something, and it would get to where I wouldn't even tell Joe because I knew he was going to tell me to not do it and to just let it go. And to me, I can't let it go. Like, if I'm already at that space, letting it go is impossible. So that was not helping. And then here's the deal. I already know he doesn't want me to do it. And I know I probably shouldn't do it. So I'm already feeling all this pressure. But then there's pressure to push back because the anxiety in me is like, no, I need to get this done. And then when he would put pressure on top of that, I would feel like I needed to. Not intentionally. He was just trying to help me. He was trying to get me to let it go because the truth is I needed to let it go, but I couldn't. And so I would just end up running like into another room and just crying because I couldn't handle the pressures that were going on in my brain. It was terrible.
And I think that we had a moment recently where, I basically identified like a negative thought pattern in your speech about how you were talking about something, and you instantly got frustrated because you went back to that. Like, I just feel like I have so much to improve, and I'm not getting any better. And I explained it to you, like, I was like, sweetheart, I'm in your corner, and your coach, your corner man, when they point out something that you need to stop doing or improve, it's not because they think that you are worthless. It's not because they think that you're just garbage. It's because they care about you and they want to help you get better. And so I think that kind of helps solidify that sense of, when you have panic attacks, when the fog comes down, it's just a setback, and that's all it is. It doesn't represent a failure. It doesn't represent the loss of all the progress that you've made to this point. And as far as me and my perspective, now I am a supporter and I am a partner with you on this journey, helping you to make that progress and encouraging you and now,
calling me out in a good way. You still call me out, but you say it in words.
Well, and it's because
that help me
because I understand what's going on, and so I have a better grasp on what's going to help and what's going to hurt, and so you, instead of feeling external pressure that's similar to the kind of pressure your anxiety makes you feel, it's a different pressure. So if the pressure of anxiety is forcing you down, my pressure is helping you to rise up. And I feel like that just came through me getting educated and us having more intelligent conversations about it, normalizing it so that it's not this crazy thing that we just keep in the closet. And I think that even leads to, like, with family and friends now,
I'm more open about it.
Our friends and family know, and so to where something has happened where in the past I wouldn't have had an explanation and I would have just felt bad and awkward and embarrassed. Now I can tell our friends, and things like that.
They know I have anxiety, so sometimes you don't even have to tell them. Like, if I'm acting a certain way, they know.
But I can just tell them, like, guys, hey, Crystal's had a panic attack or something like that, and we're working with it, and they're understanding and they are supportive, and so now all of a sudden you don't feel like you are like Frankenstein's monster who has to hide from the world that doesn't understand you. You feel like you live in a world of allies and friends and all these people who have your back.
Well, and I think that's the other part of anxiety. It's like sin, we want to keep it hidden.
And it isolates us. And
I felt I would get so mad at Joe because I would feel so alone, but it was my own fault. Not that I knew, but because I isolated myself because I didn't understand what I was going through or how to have you help me. And
even since even since we just sort of, this came out into the light more and stuff, as you started sharing your journey more, the people who have come out of the woodwork saying, that's me. I deal with the same thing. And so all of a sudden you're not alone, you're not isolated, you have a community of people around you. And so the shame is gone. The stigma is gone. And now we're making real progress in this journey together that I'm sure in years past, both of us wondered at one time or another, is this going to be the end of us? Are we ever going to get over this? Is this going to just be too big for us to handle? Is now making us stronger. And I
feel closer to you now than I feel like I've ever been.
It's making us better, and it's even helping us help other people.
Not that we're not going to have setbacks, because we do not have it all together. We are still learning.
But setbacks
Setbacks are okay.
Yeah, setbacks are fine. They don't mean that you've lost all your progress.
Exactly.
So I hope that this discussion about our journey with anxiety and what it's like to be the spouse of someone who has anxiety has helped you. Just to recap and give you some actionable stuff, I'd say, first of all, because there are different types of anxiety,
Yes.
manifest themselves in different ways. If you feel like that might be you, do some research, talk to medical professionals, talk to people who know what they are talking about, and figure out what's going on. Normalize it, bring it out of the shadows. That will get rid of the shame. It'll get rid of the stigma. It chances are it will build a community around you, like it did for us, of people who want to support you, who know how to support you and help you get better, that have things that they can recommend. And then as spouses, become each other's coaches, become each other's corner people, not just a bystander, not just someone who adds the same kind of pressure that they're already feeling, but someone who is wise in the area that your spouse is struggling, so that you can know how to help. And so your spouse doesn't have to feel like my partner does not understand what I'm going through. Because the beautiful thing about, especially the internet age, is that we can research so many things, and if we're wise and use discernment in our researching.
Use discernment, people.
we can really help our spouses. And I mean, because trust me, even just that small thing of feeling like I am not totally alone and totally misunderstood is a big step in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, and I would also say, don't be afraid. I was so afraid to have people know what was going on with me, just because I didn't know what was going on with me, but I didn't want them to be disappointed. And sure, you're going to get at first, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that, and I don't want that for you. And they don't. But don't take that as you did something wrong. Take that as, okay, well, this is what I need to get better, and be honest about it. I need this.
And those people want the best for you.
And they do. They really do.
So, to wrap things up, if you would like to get basically more regular updates from Crystal, specific to her journey through anxiety, the things that she is discovering, the things that are working for her, and just the story that she is telling, which has been really insightful up to this point, make some noise. So she will start maybe her own podcast or her own vlog.
And if you ask to be my friend on Facebook, it is a private account, but I will accept it.
But make some noise if you want to hear from her more, and we will set that up. We will make that happen because she has a lot to share. And we will probably, come back to this topic periodically on the Fight For You podcast, because it's part of our lives, it's part of our marriage, and it's part of a lot of marriages.
Yes.
So I hope this episode has been uplifting and encouraging to you as we get rolling again with regular episodes. One thing that we really want to do is address specific questions and topics that you choose for us. Questions that you ask, topics that you pick. We really want to lend the experience that we have gained to that and our...
Or learn for you. We can research things.
But we really want to do that. So go to the Fight For You podcast Facebook page. We have an official Facebook page. Send us a message there. We already have some great questions that we will be getting to.
We will get to
very soon and dedicating whole episodes to. And we're really excited for that. And we want tons more because we want this to be a dynamic conversation. And we want to help you. We want to give you input on the things that you want to know about, so that we can do an even better job of adding value to your lives. If the Fight For You podcast is adding value to your lives, to your marriages, we would love to hear from you. We'd love it if you left a review on the Facebook page, and we'd love it if you shared the Fight For You podcast with your friends, so that we can help more couples, so that we can inspire more couples to fight for each other, to problem solve creatively, and to use conflict to their advantage in their marriages, because that's what we're all about. So thank you very much for tuning in and listening to this episode. We will see you next time.